Now that we have our coin ready, let us make a placeholder character so that we can move the character around and maybe somehow interact with the coin over the next few videos. The first thing I kind of want to do is to change the color of the floor. Usually, you can go to the details while you have it selected, and you'll see that by default, we have this one that comes with Unreal Engine. Now, if you click on this and just hit Control Space to bring up your content browser, then you'll see that this is probably the main material. It might look a bit different because I changed it, but what you can do is to right click and create a material instance out of it. And the material instance, you can just change the color as you like them. So I'll make it a bit darker. And let's try dragging it onto our mesh. And it isn't dark enough for me, so I'm going to try to have it at a color I like. And let us also maybe have a different color for the line. So I prefer having a bluish one, but it really is up to you how you want to go about it. And that just makes the mesh pop out a bit more for me. Now, what I want to do now is to start customizing our character. So let us go back into our content browser. And in our blueprint, you'll see that we still have our player. Let us actually put all of this into another folder. So I'll call this folder pickups. And everything that is related to it, I'll move it into this folder. Usually I would have the mesh and texture into one folder because after we import them in, we don't really interact with them too much. So let me just do that. Now they're in and we have our materials. So let us go into our player character. And you have to click on this if you want to just see the full window. And you'll see that the character looks like any basic blueprint. You have your components, the place where you can put your variables, and your graph editor. Over here in our viewport, we can see what our character looks like. And right now, there isn't really anything. Now, in this course, I am planning to make a whole character. But for now, whenever we're starting with a project, it is usually a really good idea to have placeholders so that you can just get the feel of your character and its mechanic first. So I would just go to add and add in a cylinder. Let me just size the cylinder a bit. I'm just going to change the overall scale. If you turn on this lock, you can scale everything at the same time. And this can be the body for now. Let me just add in a cube just to give it a sense of direction. So let's just be happy with this. For the cylinder, I'll just give it a different color for now so that it stands out. Maybe this basic asset 1. And let us hit compile and try dragging in our character. So you can see that this is what it looks like. We are definitely going to have to scale down the coin for the coin blueprint actor. So for now, I'll just start by creating the movement blueprints of our character. That is usually the first thing we should work on. And now I'll start by creating the basic movement blueprints for our character. So first, let us just bring up our player blueprint. I'm just going to dock it here so that I don't have to have it as a different tab. And basically, the blueprints that we're going to use are the add movement inputs. So right click and just click on add movement inputs. And these are the ones that actually give movement to our character. But in order to add them, we actually need to have input. So let me just create a folder for our player. I'm going to put this here. In order to create them, you have to right click and go to input. We'll have to create input actions as well as an input mapping context. Now before, whenever you wanted to add an input, you've had to go into the project settings and go to the input over here. But now since Unreal Engine 5, we would have to use the enhanced input action system. So now let me just call this input action underscore movement. This one would be input mapping context underscore player. Now let's go here. For our value type, it has to be a 2 value because we are working with an X and Y axis. So make sure that it is 2D. I'll hit save. And now for our input mapping context, we can create one. And for here, we can just assign the one that was just created. and we can have 4 different inputs. One will be W, S, A, D, and that is how we will move. So for this one, we don't need to add any modifiers, but for this one, we're going to have to make sure that we add in a negate, which would make it a -1 value. By default, we will be working with the Y value. So now we're just making sure that this is the positive Y and this is the negative Y. And now we can go over here to A and add in a swizzle input action values, and that'll just turn it into the X value. And for this one, I'll put it in for this one as well. For the A, which is going towards the left, we're going to have to make sure to also add in a negate. So now our input mapping context is pretty much ready. We can go into our blueprint player. First, we have to assign our input mapping context. So make sure to bring out your player controller, which is like the brains of your character. And now we can just drag this out and type in enhanced, the enhanced input local player subsystem. And once we've added this, drag this one out and add in a mapping context one. Add mapping context. Make sure that it comes out at the begin play because we only need to do it once when the character spawns. And just put this one to this. And I believe now our input should be working. For example, now if I were to maybe add in the enhanced, so you can click on this one and you'll see that we can definitely trigger it now. So let us try maybe print stringing and see what happens when we try to trigger it. So let me just delete this actually and make sure that there's a player start. I'll hit play. And if I try to trigger it, you'll see that hello is coming out. So you can tell that the input is working. And now we just need to add our movement to it. The node that we're going to have to use is to add movement input. Add movement. And we need to have one for the X as well as for the Y. And we also need to make sure to split the structure pin on this. Just right click and split it because we want both the X and a Y value. And now we can plug this triggered over here, as well as this one over here. And for our world direction, for the X one, just make sure that you set the world direction X to 1. And for this one, we can set it to this. And I believe the Y can be a 1 as well. Hit compile. And another thing we have to do is to change the way our camera looks because by default, we're just seeing it from this perspective. So we can add in a spring arm like so. And to our spring arm, we're going to add in a camera. Make sure that the camera is below the spring arm so that it is parented to it. And now you can rotate your spring arm, maybe around this much. Let us hit compile and see how it looks. So you'll see now that this is working. If I hit D, it'll move right. If I hit A, it'll move left, W, and S. So it's moving in all the right directions. Later on, we'll definitely be adding a new input for our mouse cursor because I want it to face wherever the mouse is facing for a top-down controller. And that'll be pretty much it for this video. We created our basic character, and now we can try to learn the basics of Blueprint by interacting with the coin blueprint. So thanks for following, and see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.